Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Containment Bay P1T6 where we take on the goddess Sophia. This encounter has a lot of things to watch out for, and you may find yourself losing your balance and getting tilted. You might even get the demi-urge to quit, but fear not, I can be your arrow. My name is Ms. Tech, and I'll be your primal guide. Sophia has 3 important attacks to look out for throughout the entire encounter. Getting hit by any of these attacks will place a stacking vulnerability up debuff on you that lasts 2 minutes. As such, it's important to avoid these at all times. Thunder 2 is a frontal cone on the primary target that will do high damage. There is no telegraph, so all players need to be aware of her cast bar and move as necessary. The second is Thunder 3, a donut or mid-range attack that can be avoided by either standing inside of her hitbox or at maximum range. The third is Arrow 3, a point-blank AoE that will also knock back anyone it hits. As the platform has no barriers on Extreme, it's important to not get hit or you will probably die. All 3 of these abilities will be cast throughout the fight in conjunction with various other mechanics. Learning how to recognize these immediately and moving accordingly is the first step on the path to victory. We begin the fight with the tank facing Sophia away from the group. The main tank will have to dodge Thunder 2 as necessary. Immediately after, Sophia will summon her daughter in one of the 4 corners of the room. The daughter deals damage and knocks back relative to her position on the platform. All players must run and stand in front of the head to avoid getting pushed off of that platform. Shortly after, Sophia will spawn 4 clones around the platform. She will tether to random clones and cast an ability. This ability will then be copied by the tethered clones. Sophia will go through this combo twice until all clones have an ability assigned to them. Then she will cast Execute. At the end of this cast, each clone will throw out the abilities they copied while tethered. This order of events creates a number of safe zones on the platform. Players will have to quickly discern where the safe zones are while Sophia is tethering her abilities. Then, as soon as Execute begins to cast, players will need to position themselves in those safe zones to avoid damage and debuffs. A good rule of thumb is to look for the clones that copy Thunder 2 or Thunder 3 and stand directly behind or underneath them. Arrow clones will never be safe. Next up, Sophia will cast Cloudy Heavens, go immune, and summon 3 adds. This cast also applies Eternal Doom on all players. If the timer runs out or a player suffers a killing blow, Eternal Doom will zombify them. This acts as a mini DPS check, and you'll want to destroy all adds before your timer runs out and Sophia casts her ultimate. We have one tank pick up the second and third demiurges. The other tank will grab the first demiurge. Players will focus down the second demiurge first to keep it from healing the other adds. At 50%, it will cast Divine Spark and players will need to turn around to avoid confusion. The third demiurge will be destroyed next. Watch out for his column attack and move out of the ice puddle as necessary. At around 50%, he'll cast Gnostic Grant. This is a massive directional attack that all players need to stand behind to avoid. An easy way for everyone to dodge this involves pulling him directly into the corner after the ice puddle drops. The first demiurge will cast either vertical or horizontal Kanoma. These are specific directional parry debuffs that will knock back and debuff any players that attack him from the affected sides. Watch out for each cast or the visual shield indicators and adjust appropriately. At around 50%, he'll cast Infusion at a random player. This deals unsurvivable damage and will zombify the targeted player unless the damage is split by the entire raid. This cast also has directional knockbacks associated with it, but the raid can stand in the very center of the telegraph to avoid this. Once all the adds are down, Sophia will call down the Scales of Revelation. 2 scales will form on either side of the platform and the platform will begin to tilt. Players will need to move to the east, then west to avoid getting knocked off here. Healers will also need to be ready for the incoming raid damage from her ultimate blast. Next up, we'll see Quasar. Anytime this is cast, meteors are brought down on either players for proximity-based damage or on the scales to cause the platform to tilt, or both. Since this doesn't always happen together, it gets pretty confusing referring to 2 different mechanics with one name. That said, I'll use Quasar when referring to the player-targeted proximity markers, and Equilibrium when referring to the tipping of the scales caused by various meteor spawns. The first Quasar and Equilibrium demonstration will target players for proximity-based damage. Players will be stacked in the north with Sophia, and once the markers are out, they can run to the south to minimize damage. The tethers on each scale will show us the Equilibrium formula that balances the scales. As you'll notice, 3 orange meteors perfectly balance 1 blue meteor, and the platform does not tilt. Sophia will then cast one of 3 ability options, and players will need to dodge accordingly. The next equilibrium will be uneven, and players will need to position themselves on the lighter side, away from the blue meteor so that they do not slide off of the platform when it tilts. The basic rule of handling the tilting platform is simple. Always move away from the side of the blue meteor. The tricky part comes in once you realize that Sophia can send her daughter to the north or south edges of of the platform during the tilt to blast you with a massive laser that will debuff any player's hit. Since the laser blasts during the tilt, you'll need to be pre-positioned to avoid it. To do this, it's important to realize that the differences in weight of each meteor on each scale will cause the platform to tilt mildly or severely. A mild tilt will have the player travel about 75% of the length of the platform, or as I like to call it, the short slide. A severe tilt will have the player travel the full length of the platform, also known as the long slide. Since a mild tilt will only cause the player to go 3/4 of the way down the platform, standing at the very edge will land the player directly in the beam path once the platform tilts. Therefore, anytime you have a daughter and a mild tilt incoming, players will need to stand 3/4 of the way on the opposite end of the platform, roughly in the area of these patterns on the ground. This will send the player to the edge of the platform during the tilt, out of the danger of the daughter's beam. While you can do lots of math on the fly to determine the differences in weight between the two scales, to easily and quickly figure out what tilt is about to happen, you can follow these basic rules. Number 1. Always run away from the blue meteor side. The platform will always tip towards the heavier side, which will have the blue meteor. While you're running to the appropriate side, you can look at the other tethers and meteors to determine whether a severe tilt or a mild tilt is incoming. If the total number of tethers and meteors is even, the platform tilt will be severe and you'll need to be at the very opposite edge to avoid falling off and getting hit by the laser blast. If the total number of tethers or meteors is odd, the platform tilt will be mild and you can be 3/4 of the length of the platform to avoid the daughter's beam. Learning the difference between mild and severe tilt is the most complicated aspect of this phase, but once you learn to quickly recognize exactly what's happening, the movement will become more natural. Let's back up a bit. The phase began with quasars dropping on players in the first equilibrium demonstration. We had to dodge one of the 3 abilities and then adjust for the next equilibrium that introduced the platform tilt. It's important to note here that if the boss enters this phase under 76%, she will skip all of these introductory mechanics and jump right into the next Thunder 2. Do not let this catch you off guard. For the most part, the boss can be tanked near the center of the platform to facilitate movement for upcoming mechanics during this phase. We continue with equilibrium. Sophia will also disappear and reappear on the east or west side of the platform and cast Onrush. This dive bomb-like mechanic covers half of the platform and any player's hit will take high damage and get debuffed with vulnerability up. Players will need to quickly identify and move to the appropriate side of the scales while making sure they're on the correct side to avoid Onrush. Once Sophia returns, players will be affected by Sin and Punishment, these black and white circles. Players must pair up and overlap each black and white circle to avoid high damage and debuffs from the resultant explosions. You can pre-assign player pairs and resolve these circles quickly. Next up, healers will need to watch out for Sintamani, raid-wide AoE damage blasts. There is no cast bar for this, and the only indication is this yellow wind-up animation. Shield and heal as necessary. The first time you see this, you'll deal with 2 Sintamani casts in a row. Immediately after, 4 clones will spawn around the room. The general mechanics are the same, but you'll notice that execute may not happen right away as she weaves in other mechanics. Look for the safe zones created by the Thunder 3 tethers and get ready to move, but not just yet. After the second tether of arrow, Sophia will then cast a tank buster. There is no cast bar here and the only indication is this visual green wind-up animation. This deals high damage, knocks back, and debuffs the affected tank. Use cooldowns as necessary. The off tank will need to provoke during this wind-up animation. After the tank buster, players will remain in the center and wait for the daughter to spawn on one of the sides. As soon as she spawns, players can then run to the safe zone that will not be affected by the daughter's beam for the incoming execute. Once execute is out, players can return to the center. Healers will need to deal with 3 more casts of Sintamani and another tank buster before the next equilibrium. During this equilibrium, the daughter will spawn on the north or south edge again. Players will need to make sure they pre-position appropriately for a long or short slide to avoid the daughter's beam during the tilt. Right after, you'll need to stack in for Thunder 3, and then tanks will need to swap during the next tank buster. This next equilibrium will have both Sophia and the daughter trying to blast you. Move to the appropriate side to handle the tilt, stand on the correct side to avoid Sophia, and then make sure you're pre-positioned appropriately to dodge the daughter blast when the platform tilts. Another triple AoE to heal through, another tank buster, a Thunder 2 to dodge, and then more Sin and Punishments. Remember to stack with your partner. As the circles are resolving, the daughter will spawn in one of the corners. As soon as your circles are gone, run in front of her to avoid getting punted off the platform. After Gnosis, another tank swap and tank buster occurs. Next up, Sin and Punishment will happen again, a second before the next equilibrium cast. To handle this, players will stack up for sin and punishment as normal and identify the correct side to run to. There is no daughter beam or onrush during this one, so players just need to make sure they're the appropriate distance on the opposite side to avoid getting knocked off. As soon as the circles are resolved, run to the appropriate side. Next, the clones will spawn again, but the raid will have to deal with 3 more hits of Sintamani and another tank buster before the tethers. The first tether will be a Thunder 2 cleave. Make sure you identify which clone is affected, as this will be your safe zone, but don't move just yet. The second tether will be Arrow 2. The twist here is players will be targeted for quasars with those pesky proximity-based markers. Since you don't want to drop these in the safe zone, players must first bait these meteors on the opposite end of the platform to the safe clone spot. Once they drop down, players can then make their way towards the safe zone. A tank buster will land first, and then sin and punishment circles will appear as execute is casting. To handle this, tanks will do their thing while the rest of the raid positions in the safe area behind the safe clone, ready for sin and punishment. Stack those circles appropriately while dodging execute. Another 3 hits of Sintamani and then another tank buster. The next equilibrium will have another daughter beam to dodge. By now, you should notice a familiar pattern emerging. From this point on, the encounter will repeat the same mechanic combos you've seen so far. With practice, the movement should come more and more naturally to you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. If you'd like a more detailed analysis of the encounter, please check out the text version of this guide listed in the description below. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.